Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and 2. Hear the word of the Lord. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does a man gain by the toil at which he toils under the sun? Generation goes and generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full, to the place where the streams flow, where they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has been already, in the ages long before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than all who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the children of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come, all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and a striving after wind. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his holy word. Well, are you a driven person? I bet you are. What other kind of people go to a gym and sing psalms and listen to long sermons on the Bible? And if you just wanted to play church, you'd go to a decent looking sanctuary and you'd sing your old favorites or maybe the newest hits, and you'd hear a peppy, brief motivational speech and be home early. Driven people, they're focused, they're ambitious, they're determined, they're intense, they're not wanting to waste a second. Singapore is full of driven people, always on the go, filling the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. And Singapore escalators aren't just for riding, for example. They're for making your stair climbing faster. Many people walk up the escalator as it's moving there. Escalators even have a yellow line right down the middle of it for those lazy people. They got some lazy people in Singapore. For the lazy ones who stand and ride, and they on the right side. And we escalator walkers, notice I say we escalator walkers passing on the left. And that one way, I fit into Singapore pretty well. Well, I may be the only Westerner ever to tell a Singaporean to move! As he was standing in the middle of the escalator, as I was trying to walking up. Move! Life's too short just to ride the escalator. Well, some of you have succeeded in business because you're driven people. You might have come from China incurring debt to get here, maybe then another debt to buy or open a restaurant, and then you resolved to pay off that debt and then help support people back home, your family there, driven by the weight that it is all on you. And so you work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, no days off, other than maybe Thanksgiving once a year, because no one goes out to restaurants on Thanksgiving. Now understand, most of us here, Sunday's a day off anyway, so there's no sacrifice in coming to church on Sunday. For at least a couple others here, 3 others, their business can be open on Sunday. They own it themselves. So being here, closing down, or having somebody else to work, it's a sacrifice for them. You understand? Because normally they just work because they got to make money. But they don't. Well, but that's their life. This is just work. There's no vacations. There's nothing but work for years. I'm not talking about a couple of years. I'm talking about decades. Living simply. It takes drive and discipline, a will of steel, all with the hope that one day you'll be able to afford something better, that the debts will be paid off, the family back home will be taken care of, and maybe you haven't missed too much of your kids' lives, so that eventually you'll be able to relax and you'll get a nice house and see your kids succeed. You're driven. There's good news for driven people in Ecclesiastes. You can relax now. Enjoy life. Enjoy now. 20 years ago, I was depressed. I was 37 years old, living in a nice home in Kentucky. Just a couple of months earlier, I thought I was set for the life I had been working so hard for. I was the type of guy who told Singaporeans to move. I bulldozed my way through a PhD program while working, walking outside in 30-degree below weather in Chicago, writing academic papers hunched over in my car at 3 a.m. I had arrived, finally, I thought, to where everything I had been working for, to get it. Church, academics, success, but it all turned to nothing. And so I sat in the recliner, staring out the window, staring at nothing really, with a TV on but not really watching, a freezer full of ice cream which I didn't eat because I didn't care. And I thought, What's the use? There's good news for depressed people in Ecclesiastes. First, you're right. What is the use? But you might as well enjoy yourself. Ecclesiastes is perhaps the strangest book in the Bible, stranger than the Song of Solomon, which is not an allegory. Even stranger than Revelation, with beasts coming out of the sea with 10 heads and 7 horns, which is an allegory. Ecclesiastes is the only book in the Bible in which a fundamentalist graduate of Bob Jones University who would swear he believes in the inerrancy of Scripture would say, I don't like that book. It's worldly. That literally happened. I guess I'm more fundamentalist than the fundamentalist because I believe even Ecclesiastes is inspired. And indeed, that Ecclesiastes is in the Bible is proof of the inspiration of the Bible, that God put the Bible together, not just a bunch of religious people, because religious people would never have considered Ecclesiastes for a book they put together. They had a committee of religious people. We're going to put together a Bible, and you send an Ecclesiastes. Here's my submission. Consider this for your Bible. Hey, look at that. Sorry, no way. Go away. We don't want this. Not for our book. Thankfully, God did include it. I love Ecclesiastes because it's good news for driven people like me. Good news for people like me or you, so driven you walk up escalators. People who are so sure that you can make something of yourself, make a name, a career, a fortune, a family. People like me who might be driven to despair when finally you stare out the window and you realize you've made nothing. There's good news for you when you realize that. I think my usual way of preaching is not right for Ecclesiastes. This is a fit. Standing behind the pulpit like this, formal and focused, like a laser beam, getting the message across, the message of the passage across to you. Intense, driven. Kind of the mood of my usual style. It doesn't fit Ecclesiastes, does it? You know, I should be, even consider this, I should be sitting down here on the platform, on the edge of the platform, kind of looking out sideways toward the wall over there. Not even looking in your eye, that's too intense. Leaning back against the pulpit, legs crossed, with a cup of something tasty in one hand and a cigarette in the other. I don't smoke, I never have. You know, it's bad for your health after all. But I got a feeling what the preacher would say. He'd say, well, if you like it, don't worry about it. You're going to die anyway. Might as well enjoy yourself. I'm probably not the best one to speak on Ecclesiastes. I should be able to sit back with the Bible in my lap, blowing smoke in between saying, dude, it's all meaningless anyway. Chill. That didn't come naturally to me, which is why I need Ecclesiastes. Well, here we see the good news for driven or depressed people. What's the use, they think, when life doesn't turn out like they think? We see that here in 5 parts. First, facts. Second, philosophy. Third, fun. Fourth, forgotten. And finally, futility. And oh, the joy of alliteration. First, the facts. What's the facts, you driven or depressed people? The preacher tells us the Hebrew word comes from, for preacher here, translated, comes from the word for assembly or gathering. It means the one over an assembly, the assembler, the preacher, the teacher, the speaker, maybe the president, it could be, perhaps the professor. He says he's the son of David, king in Jerusalem. He's the philosopher king, the wise man. And he's going to tell us the facts. The facts are vanity of vanities. The word literally means vapor. It's like a puff of wind. You know, like that mist stuff comes from vaping. Right? You've seen that? It just kind of disappears. You see it for a few seconds, it just dissipates. Everything under the sun is like that. Except it gets worse. It's not just vapor. It's vapor of vapor. You know, if vapor could produce vapor, well, that's it. If the whole universe were vapor, and in that vapor universe, there was its own vapor, that's what everything is like under the sun. And notice under the sun, that's the qualifier, a specifying of what exactly is vapor, what's vanity, what's meaningless, what's empty, what's unsubstantial, what's useless. Not everything, but everything under the sun. What is under the sun is the world we can see, that we can observe, the horizons of this world. The things we look at, we hear, we touch, we taste, the work we can do, the things we can achieve with our bodies, our minds. That's the stuff that is vanity, this vapor, this meaningless. It's for nothing. Of course, for most people, that's their whole lives. They live constantly for what is under the sun. And so for them, yes, everything is meaningless, and they don't know it. And if they find out without God's word, they're going to be very depressed. They're going to start staring out the window and thinking, what's the use? The fact is that under the sun, you're getting nowhere. 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. What's the gain if you work for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for years to make a life for you and for your family, and your family doesn't care? I know a couple who did that, who worked those long hours, even kept the kids out of church so that they could work on Sunday for them, keep the business open, who grew a successful business, were able to branch out to 2 restaurants. They were then, after a while, they acquired enough money, able to buy a nice house near a golf course. And at least one daughter grows up and goes away and never wants to visit again. What did the man gain from all his toil? In verse 3, gain, it means profit. You end up with more than you began with. Your work has gained you this. Something you can point to. A house, a bank account, a car, a family. Under the sun. In this life, people think that they gained if they end up with more money and more stuff than they started with, than they were raised with. He who dies with the most toys wins, right? That's what they think. Except they don't really think at all. Or they'd see that here under the sun, no one gains because everyone ends up with exactly what they came with. Nothing. Hearses don't pull U-Hauls after all. No trailers pulling their stuff up to heaven when they're done. You can't transfer money to the dead. I mean, the Chinese try. It doesn't work. They even have this paper money stuff. And they have this idea that if you, in a funeral, you burn it, it somehow gets transferred to the dead. Of course, it doesn't work. It goes nowhere. At Mary's father's funeral, back I think in 92, around that time, these stacks of this paper money stuff, right? Stacked up there, ready, and they're going to burn it, and it's supposed to go to him wherever he is so he can spend it. Of course, it's fake stuff. Some printer prints out, and they buy it. But it's supposed to be transferred, and somehow it becomes real money over there. I think if it's burned, if it's fake here, it's going to be fake over there, even if it gets there. But anyway, I'm looking at this stuff. I guess she's my sister-in-law, too. She's Mary's brother's wife. Comes up to me, and she says, yeah, we burn this with the father so he'll get the money. Normally at a funeral, I would try to be respectful to whatever the beliefs of the people. But I'm figuring, I'm dressed in black just like she is. I'm just as much a relative to the deceased as she is. And so I just say, it doesn't go anywhere. It just burns up. Comes smoke. Vapor. Nothing. You can't transfer money to the dead. So we all end up as empty-handed as when we started. So what's the use? Generation goes and new generation comes, but the earth remains forever. At least it lasts for this age and it will outlast all of us. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. Same old, same old. The fact is that nothing is changing. The wind blows around, the water flows into the oceans, it evaporates, falls as rain, circulates again. Everything is going around and around like a merry-go-round. It's getting nowhere, like a treadmill. When I ran, I hated treadmills. I hate the feeling of exerting yourself, but then getting nowhere. You just literally you are getting nowhere. But I realized, hey, if I ran my usual course out through the roads, turned left out of my driveway, went for 6 miles, my usual course, I ended up back at my driveway. I hadn't gotten anywhere. Now an optimist will say, but you got in shape. Yeah, for a while. Then I stopped running and I got chubby again. All things are full of weariness, he says in verse 8. A man cannot utter it. You can't describe how tiresome life is under the sun. How it drains you. So that you eventually just shrug your shoulders and mutter, what's the use? The fact is, we're never satisfied. Again, in verse 8, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. You never watch a movie that's just so good. I mean, that movie is so excellent. You'll never see a better one, and so you're satisfied. I'll never need to see another movie again. You never hear a song that's just so fulfilling that you're happy. I never need to hear another song again. It's addiction. And now with our phones, we can feed that addiction all the time. Constantly staring down. Sometimes people walking around looking at their phones, looking at something, listening to something. And we never have enough of it. And we never learn that we'll never have enough of it. The fact is that we're not really going anywhere under the sun. In verse 9, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. The more things change, the more they stay the same. In verse 10, is there anything that is really new? We might say, living in this age of rapid innovation, well, the iPhone is new. Yeah, this is new, isn't it? The internet's new. Maybe. But what we do with it is the same. Nonsense. Looking at cat videos. Ranting about politics with somebody else. Porn. Archaeologists have, they dig up pornographic engravings from Pompeii or from the Canaanites. And with our smartphones, we're conveying the same content. Nothing's changed. Same song, different verse. It has been already in ages before, in verse 10. Maybe we'll think, I'll make a difference. I'll write a book or a song or build a building or give the money or be the parent who will be remembered. But how many people do you know from the past? Do you even know your own great-grandparents? How many of your 8 great-grandparents can you name? And if you're one of those few, we can take it up another great until you start to forget. What makes you think your great-grandchildren will remember you? Now, I don't mean to depress you. Those are just the facts. Well, next is philosophy, starting in verse 12. The facts are that everything under the sun is nothing. That is going nowhere, and try as hard as you can, you won't change that. You'll be forgotten just like you forgot your ancestors, just like you forgot your great-grandparents. You might think then, that's brutal. But those are the facts. What I can do, though, is understand it. I can be philosophical. I can be wise. And so with my philosophy, I can transcend the meaninglessness, the vaporness of the world. By understanding it, I can rise above it, you might think. Ecclesiastes is, after all, wisdom literature. And you go to wisdom literature like Job and Proverbs or Ecclesiastes here to overcome the illusions of this world, to understand. And so starting in verse 12, be a philosopher. Now you may think, I don't have time. I got so much work to do. But a king does. He has the time. A philosopher king. In verse 13, the philosopher applied his heart to get wisdom. Seek and search out. He says he sought, he searched out strenuously. He's laboring at wisdom like some of you have labored at the restaurant business. He's going to succeed in overcoming the dreariness of life under the sun. He's going to understand it. You know where wisdom got him? It tells us right here. Verse 13. It's an unhappy business. This life merely under the sun is depressing. It makes you want to give up, and no matter, what's the use? Crawl in a hole. You look at everything in this life, business, academics, sports, society, whatever it is, relationships. Behold, in verse 14, look at the fact it's vain, it's a vapor. It's like chasing the wind. You'll never catch it, and even if you did, you caught nothing. He declares in verse 16, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experiences of wisdom and knowledge. He had the wisdom, and in verse 17, he applied his heart and his mind. He worked hard at it to perceive what's going on in the world, what life's about under the sun. What is it like? What's his conclusion after all his philosophy and straining to understand? It's like chasing wind. 4 in verse 18. In other words, because, he's explaining why even wisdom under the sun is wind chasing, because in much wisdom, that is much keen understanding of the world, is much vexation, much grief, much irritation, much anger, much sorrow. Because now you see how many people are wasting their lives on nonsense, living for things that are nothing, heading toward nothingness. your insight into it doesn't change it. It just makes you sad. You stare out the window and you think, what's the use? Third, let's try some fun, starting in chapter 2. Philosophy didn't work. It didn't help us make it something meaningful out of this life under the sun. So might as well have fun. So let's try every kind of fun there is. In chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. First, laugh. Go to some comedy club. Or you can stay home and stream Jim Gaffigan. Now, he's hilarious. Still, in verse 2, it's ridiculous in both senses of the word. Let's drink then. So have all the best wine. Or maybe beer or liquor if that's your thing. If you still have wisdom and don't get fooled by the intoxication, you'll realize, that didn't turn out to be anything. How about just fooling around? Folly, he calls it in verse 3. Video games, laser tag, paintball, go-karts, bowling. How about roll a large ball with some little holes drilled into it for your fingers down a narrow wooden floor to knock over some wooden things. I don't know why they call them pins. They don't pin anything. Wooden things, knock them down and then set them back up again and knock them down again and do that over and over. Roller skating, going in circles with wheels on your shoes. Axe throwing. Tubing or rafting down a river. Zip lines. Skiing. Paragliding. Surfing. Amusement parks with roller coasters. Bowling. That's what I got a gym for. Cards. Mahjong. Wordle. Pool. We got a pool table out here. Ping pong. Back there. Whatever. There's nothing wrong with all that stuff. You're not sinning by doing them. But what do you think they'll be worth in the end? No, that didn't do it. What about instead of wasting my time on all that stuff, I grow up and I make something big. The fun of accomplishment. Most of us don't have the resources to make great works, in verse 4, because most of us aren't kings here. And so we think, if only I had billions of dollars, then I could have a meaningful life. That's the only thing between me and meaningful life is those billions of dollars. I could build mansions like the Biltmore, the Breakers, the Hearst Castle, Tara, Xanadu. Maybe don't be so selfish. Not just to build something for yourself. Have a building built at your alma mater and then have your name on it. Carpenter Hall, right there in the middle of Stanford University. Wouldn't that be great? If that doesn't work, maybe resorts in verse 5. Gardens and parks, irrigating pools. Congratulate yourself that you're good for the environment. Still not working? Maybe be a business giant, a tycoon, an oligarch, with employees depending on you for their livelihood, in verse 7. I got mouths to feed, you tell people. Your life isn't for nothing because others' lives depend on you. We can tell you're somebody because of all the checks you sign and your vast possessions, warehouses full of stuff, managers to keep inventory, not just a restaurant, but you're the CEO of a worldwide chain. China Dragon, First Taste, Great Wall, International, Incorporated, with thousands of franchises all over the world. You taking your private jet to them all over the world. Bigger than McDonald's. You'd be somebody big then, wouldn't you? Maybe you just want cash. A huge bank account. In verse 8. Like Elon Musk, who just this past week sold $7 billion in stock so he'd have the cash on hand to buy Twitter. Wouldn't you like to have $7 billion of cash on hand? Write a check for $7 billion if you need to. Don't like social media? Well, just buy Twitter or Facebook or whatever. You caught the wind then, haven't you? Or maybe it's entertainment that you need. You know, Rush Limbaugh once hired Elton John for $1 million to play at his wedding reception. Of course, what do men like? What is the delight of the sons? And literally, it's specifically sons at the end of verse 8, unlike the ESV I read here. Not the generic children. The sons. What is the delight of the sons of men? In other words, what do men want? Literally, in Hebrew, at the end of verse 8, it's a concubine and concubines. Girls, girls, girls! Ah, now we're talking fun. And so you're having all the fun in the world. You're somebody big. Whatever you want, you can have in verse 10. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. You even enjoyed your work. Love your job and you'll never work a day in your life, was your philosophy. And then you sit back in your recliner with your concubines waiting on you hand and foot, your freezer stocked full of Haagen-Dazs, Elton John playing for you personally, and you stare out the window and think, what's the use? Verse 11, behold, look at all this. For all that money, all that work, all those good times, still, all was vanity, vapor, and a striving after wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Fourth part. Forgotten. So, starting in chapter 2, verse 12, because fun doesn't work, consider wisdom, madness, and folly. Which is better? To be wise or to be foolish? You won't be able to outdo this philosopher king for wisdom. You won't have the wisdom that he has, and you won't be able to have the vast experiences that he had. So what's the conclusion? Tell us, philosopher king. In verse 13, it's better to be wise than foolish. Just like it's better to be able to be in the light than in the dark. If you're wise, like if you're in the light, you can see what's happening. You can see where you're going. The wise can see. He has eyes in his head, he says in verse 14. While the fool is stumbling in the darkness. Can't figure out why is smoking leads to lung cancer or, this kind of stuff. But seeing, the wise still isn't able to avoid death. It's not like being able to see, he's able then to dodge that ditch of death and he'd never fall in. Maybe he can live a little longer. Maybe he can live a little more comfortably. He sees what makes life easier. He sees that smoking is dangerous, that drunkenness destroys the liver and probably the family. And if he or she has to, while young, wants to have a comfortable old age, provide for the kids, to have a better life, he or she will have to hunker down and work 14 hours a day, every day, hopefully making time for church for years, maybe a couple decades. Sure, that's wisdom. But what's the gain in the end? And understand, the end isn't retirement and a nice house. That's not the end. The end is the grave. And when you go there, you'll have exactly what you started with when you came out of the womb. No gain. You'll have exactly what the fool ends with, who smoked and drank too much and didn't study and didn't work hard. And you end just like him. So if you're wise, you'll say to yourself, as at the end of verse 15, this also is vanity. It's a vapor. It's nothing. Indeed, you'll be forgotten. Like most of you, if you've forgotten your great-grandparents. Maybe a name on a genealogy somewhere. But you don't really know them. Now, Chinese try to beat this with ancestor veneration. I've seen and been in their temples with hundreds or thousands of photos of ancestors on this altar. And people come and they kneel there before it and they offer their joss sticks. But it doesn't work, even for them. It doesn't go back, the remembrance of their ancestors. It doesn't go back more than a few generations. Then even in ancestor worship, the people are forgotten. Even if there's names recorded somewhere, no one knows who these names are anymore. So whether you're wise or you're foolish, you'll be forgotten. No enduring remembrance. In verse 16, maybe at best, you'll be a name on someone's genealogy. And so everything you work for, you sacrifice for, every hour of it under the sun will be for nothing. And if you have any wisdom, you'll hate that. It's grievous. It causes grief. It causes you to stare out the window depressed, thinking, what's the use? Again in verse 17, it's all vain. Vapor-like. Like chasing wind. Final part. Futility. You're wise. So you can see where all this ends up. Starting in verse 18. Do you know what that does to you? Being able to see. If you're blind, you don't know you're heading into a ditch. Ignorance is bliss, they say. But if you're wise, you're not ignorant, and so you don't have bliss. I hated all my toil in which I toiled under the sun. All that hard work, all those long days, all that missed sleep, that time when you could have been relaxing, you could have been watching your favorite shows. Instead, you drove yourself. For what? You'll learn a bunch of stuff, and you'll leave to someone who might be wise like you or might be foolish. He or she will be the owner of it all. This also, in verse 19, is vanity. It's futile. The futility of it all leads to despair in verse 20, to sitting in a recliner with the TV on but you're not watching, staring out the window, so empty of all enjoyment that even the ice cream you normally love doesn't interest you. You think, I worked so hard. I'll leave it to people who didn't work for it and who don't care about me. This also is vanity in verse 21. And a great evil. What are you going to get for all your hard work? Your 14-hour days, years without a vacation, penny pinching, your striving of heart, the anxiety, the stress you put yourself through. In verse 22, you're depriving yourself, full of sorrow. Your work is a burden. Even at night, you toss and turn because you're worried about money. You're worried about the business, about the government shutting you down, the health inspection, your family back home. You miss meals and birthdays and holidays and weddings and funerals. For what? You think in your depression, what's the use? It's all futile. Well, there's good news for depressed people in Ecclesiastes. You're right. Everything under the sun is futile. That should be some consolation that you're right if you're depressed. But you might as well, in verse 24, eat and enjoy your work. Eat and drink. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your rest. Enjoy your fun when you can have it. This also, notice that is the might as well enjoy yourself attitude, and the futility, both, is from the hand of God. The bondage to futility that this world under the sun is in, we saw, remember Romans chapter 8 verse 20, is from the hand of God. Creation, what's under the sun, was subject to futility because God reached down and subjected it. So if you're wise, you'd know that all your work is futile, like chasing wind. So what then? Don't work? Just give up? Sit in that recliner, stare out the window? Nah. You might as well work and play and enjoy yourself. Enjoy your job and your treats. I mean, what good is it to stare out a window and not eat your ice cream? What good is that? There's good news for driven people in Ecclesiastes. You can relax. God subjected everything under the sun to futility in hope that you'd start looking for what is not under the sun. God is not under the sun. And apart from Him, in verse 25, you can't eat or enjoy anything. So, stop being apart from Him. Please God by not living just for what's under the sun. Get wisdom and knowledge and joy in verse 26. Get a life that's not just a vapor. It's not just chasing after wind. Everything under the sun is in bondage to futility. So, what's the use? The use of putting everything in bondage to futility was so that you would stop living just for what's under the sun and have the freedom of the glory of the children of God through Jesus Christ. Pretty good. Huh.